Hey guys, how's it going? Ghostly Rich here today with Canadian Cruising, Kyle. As we can see, we have his Nissan Frontier again. There's his channel if you want to go check it out. And today we're going to be putting in an ARB differential cover. I absolutely love these differential covers. Yes, they cost a premium, but they work really good. If you're not going to want to use RTV, there is a lube locker version of the gasket, so you can just buy a nice gasket rather than having to wait for the fluid to, of course, kind of harden up for 15 minutes and then tie it up, and then an hour later tightening it to torque spec. Rather than having to do all that, you just get this gasket, and then we just have to follow the tightening specifications on the back here. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So if you're wondering what the heck those numbers are, that's actually telling you how to tighten the torque sequence of your gasket. Anyways, we'll get to that afterwards. Let's go ahead and drain this diff. So for removing the fluid on this Nissan Frontier, it's always best, if you are keeping the factory diff cover, to go ahead and take out the fill first. Why? Well, it's because if you don't take out the fill first, if you pull out the bottom end and you can't refill your diff cover, that's going to be a real big problem. Now, you're probably wondering, what size is it? Just grab yourself a 3/8 ratchet. You just click it onto the front here, and it literally comes out. There's actually no bit needed. So again, you just do this. Pop this guy out. Now, some people will say, oh, make sure you do it when it's cold. And some will say, make sure you do it when it's hot. So I'll tell you what it is. The benefits of doing it when it's cold, everything's in the bottom of the pumpkin, and it makes it a little bit, you'll get more of the fluid out. But if you do it when it's hot, the fluid is not, it brings the viscosity down. So it's a thinner fluid rather than it being cold and thick. So with it being thinner, it'll come out quicker and easier. I'll leave it up to you. Just be careful because you don't want to burn your hands on the fluid. So if you're doing this on a warm truck, try your best not to get the fluid on your hands. Otherwise, it could really hurt. So this is the drain. It's right here on the bottom of the pumpkin. Go ahead and pull this one out next. And it is the exact same thing. Just use your ratchet. You probably won't need an extension. You might need a small extension. This extension's pretty long. I use this just to get around our sway bar right here. So there goes the fluid. I didn't catch most of it coming out, but again, you just pull it out just like I did the fill. Now we've pulled out the drain. All you're gonna do is let it keep going. Now, you can see it's actually coming out pretty smooth, and it's still really good fluid. If yours is coming out dark and chunky, really bad chunky, it's time to pull the diff cover off to inspect, especially if you see any major metal chunks on this one. Usually the bottom, which is your drain plug, is magnetic. If you find hunks of metal on there or any, like an excessive amount of metal, it's time to pop that diff cover off, because now you have to inspect the teeth of your diff. So if you end up mixing these two up, as you can see, this is going to be your fill, and this one is going to be your drain. This one goes to the bottom, this one goes to the cover. The reason why, that's the magnet. That's what will pick up any debris. So if you were to pull this apart and you have any metal in your diff, you would see chunks of metal on here and you would know you're in trouble. If this was on the bottom, what would end up happening is it wouldn't stick to any of the metal. So, as you can see, we've got all our bolts on the outside. You can just go ahead, they're 13s, pop them out, and you can do them in any sequence, really. It doesn't even matter because we're putting new bolts in. If you were taking this off to just inspect, then yeah, make sure you hold on to your bolts. And so that one that's right there by the sway bar, I just go ahead, use a 13 box wrench and get it out. We were just thinking, oddly enough, that is exactly where it was leaking from. So we're wondering if they couldn't get that one to torque spec, and that's why it would do that. Now with the new diff cover that I'm using, okay, from there, you can grab this edge and pull. I'm gonna try and do it again with my good hand. I'm sorry if this makes anyone sick from it shaking. There. That is now free. We can move that cover out of the way, and then we're going to clean up all the sealant, actually the lack thereof. I'm actually kind of surprised. Wait till I get this out, then I'm gonna get a camera in here and I want to show you. Like, see how there's that light gray? I would expect a lot more sealant in here, considering it's factory sealed. No one's taken this off, but that's, you can see right here where it was leaking from. Look at the lack thereof of sealant. So for that brake line tube that's coming down right there that attaches the top of your diff cover, that's a 12. Take that 12 millimeter off and keep it safe. So this is a good time to just go and inspect, make sure there's no weird uneven wear, and also to go ahead and you can take a look for any metal shavings whatsoever that might be hanging in the bottom of the pumpkin. If you really want to clean this thing up, you can go ahead and spray a bunch of brake cleaner in here and just shoot everything in here with brake cleaner. Have something beneath it to catch it, and then that way you're working with a nice solid clean diff. Just make sure you get as much of the brake cleaner out as you can. That's not meaning to use a hose, it just means let it drip dry. After you've done so, the next thing I'm going to do is quickly clean up this old gasket because we need a nice smooth mating surface. Now, you might be wondering, how are you going to do that? I get these gasket scrapers, and then you can go downward and just simply do that. The last thing you don't want to do, of course, is use something too abrasive, and you don't want to be scoring the metal. Meaning, what some people also use is just a razor blade sideways. Careful with it, but you can also clean this up using that. So like I said, you just meet the angle. This one's actually got a bit of an angle to it, so you can kind of hold it on that angle, and then it's really hard when I don't have both hands. But like I said, you just come along here and just do that. And then, like I said, then just go over it one more time just to get the smooth angle, just like so. And just make sure you're working with an absolutely smooth surface. You can even use some of that diff fluid that's draining out just as a lubricant. Look at that. This stuff just comes off so easy. I think it's nice for when you're cleaning it off, but it's also bad because that's probably part of the sealant issue. When we go up top, I'll show you the diff cover and how much there really wasn't on that diff cover. But as you can see, I'm almost done cleaning, and I've only been cleaning this thing for like a little bit. Most important, see this? See how I've got some stuff on here? This is when you'd use that brake cleaner and clean off all the gears. Not that the rubber should be wrecking your gearing, but you still, if you scraped off any rust and stuff, you don't want it to eat up your gears, and that's basically it. You can also, if you elect to, use a compressor and blow out the entire gear system in there. The surface is looking nice and shiny now. Don't let this Y and this Y set you off. Those are two stamps from the factory for their own reasoning. So don't bother letting that mess with your mind. Just make sure your surface is clean. Now, if you're like, oh man, there is a score mark, like I hit it, as long as you can't catch it with your fingernail, you should be fine. If you do catch it with your fingernail, even if you use a silicone gasket, I would take a little bit of black RTV and put it over top of that score mark, and that way the silicone will dry on that piece of RTV and it'll still seal it up. But again, in any extreme cases, you might have to seek out other options, but I have seen people do that where they will, if they have a pretty bad score mark, they will do the old RTV with the gasket. Okay, so taking a look at this here, two things to note. This is your brand new ARB one. As you can see, she's a beaut. Absolutely nice. We went with red rather than black. That way it stands out a bit. As you can see, even this magnet sticks to it, which is your new bottom. So we'll be tying that in. That'll be your drain plug, and that's the new magnet that it comes with. Now, first thing to note before you go bolting this thing on, you have to note the orientation of this fill. Why? Because on a factory one, you would simply just pull that out and fill it up until the fluid spits out of the hole. With this one, the hole's way up here. So what you have to actually do, and this will be a little bit more time consuming actually, is you have to make a small mark on here, and then what you do is make sure this dipstick is clean, and you basically have to fill it up from which it's to where this hole is. So for right here, if I take a measurement, I was looking about 2.5 to the center of that screw hole is right where we have to line up on our ARB. So if I'm looking here, guess where that is? Right here. So right on this line. So once again, 2.5 is the top of this line. We can mark it. Now, there's two ways you can do this. You can do it when it's screwed in like so, or you mark it when this is unthreaded. Now, you're probably wondering, well, why would I want to mark it when it's unthreaded? And the reason why is then you don't have to constantly, as you're filling this thing up, tighten it in, loosen it out, tighten it in, loosen it out. Or if you want to, you can do it by one thread length or whatever you want to do. I usually just do it so when I seat it right on top, then I know. But again, some people make it so you have to tighten it in, but the problem is it makes it really hard when you're actually filling this thing up if you're trying to get it to the exact amount or near the exact amount. So the 8 is for the bigger bolts, which are your drain and your fill dipstick. And then you'll have a 6mm Allen key for all these that are going to go in. Now for this, what I decided and elected to do is we will be doing the fill once it's seated in there, but you only hand screw it down to the O-ring. Once you do it till the O-ring is just seated, now this is where we will mark our dipstick, and we know it's right here. So what do you need? You need a file. The file is right here. All you'll do is, we know that's in line, go ahead and rub a file on there and get it through the black. Just like that. And scrape it, if you can, all the way around the dipstick. That way you don't have to try and find your mark. You actually have a mark all the way around it. So you'll notice when you open this up, there's 4 bigger bolts. That's for the fatter part of the cover, which is right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just keep that in mind when we go to tie this in. Don't forget this. This will be that new brake cover piece for your brake line, sorry. So you'll take that 10 and tie it into there. So for right now, let's go ahead and get this and our gasket, which is right here, underneath, so that way we can get the bolts seated. So the most important thing to say is this is how you're going to do it. Seat all the bolts, but do not put any amount of torque on them yet, meaning get them all in, and then after we get all the bolts just resting on the cover and lined up, then we will do the torque sequence. If you take a look, line this up if you want to. You can even drop one of the bolts and hold it on to the cover with one of the bolts when you go underneath. Just don't scratch your cover, obviously. And that's just to hold it in that orientation. That red plate just lights the whole thing up. I don't even have to put my flashlight on. It just shows everything. So as you can see, I just put this one in lightly and this one in lightly because the bracket has to go here, and this is where our big ones go. So for right now that we have that, I was also going to take off these 4 sway bar bolts and flip the sway bar out of the way. To get a good approach on this, I decided to go ahead and loosen off the sway bar completely, just because I don't want anything to affect the torque spec on this new lube gasket. So again, the other thing that I found out is we had heard that these were 6mm. They are not. They are 1/4 inch Allen keys. So please use 1/4 inch, not 6. You don't want to strip out the bolts. So let's go ahead and show you the torque spec for this one. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And that's all you have to do. Now, one thing I noticed with this ARB cover is it has its own drain. I'll leave that up to you, but the pumpkin has a drain that's really well, and it's at the very bottom. So you can pull out both of them each time if you want to inspect, but I would make sure you always use that other drain because it is at the bottom upmost and it'll get out the most fluid. I don't feel like that one will. It's nice to have, and then it's going to have another magnet, so more chances of catching any debris just in case you need to inspect. But again, I digress. Make sure you always drop out the factory bottom one so that way you always get the best result. Now that we've gone through everything, go ahead, if you have some thread sealant, put it on the bottom. And again, we know it's the bottom because of the magnet. Throw a little bit of thread sealant on here, and let's go ahead and screw this in. Now, if you need a torque spec, you can go to about 30 foot-pounds if you really want to. But what I usually do is just tighten it like your oil plug, just get it in there nice and tight, and then that usually does it. But if you're worried, again, 30 foot-pounds. If you're gonna use thread sealant, remember, just put it on the threads just like that, and now you can screw this one in and we'll tighten it after. On the bottom one, like I said, I just threw a little bit of thread sealant on there. Just go ahead, throw it on those threads, tighten it in, and then from there, go ahead and tighten it up to 30 foot-pounds. So on the factory diff cover, remember how that bolt's right here? That one's easy. All you do is you fill up fluid until fluid starts running out. Once fluid starts running out, it's full. In this case, because of the ARB diff cover, we have to use our fill dipstick and get it to the line we made. So again, factory diff, just fill it up until the fluid runs out. ARB, you have to fill it up and monitor it on the dipstick. It's a little bit more tedious. Get those two bolts started first. Don't put them all the way in by any means. Use a pry bar. With your hand here, use the pry bar to pull the sway bar down. If you do that, you can get the first bolt in. Once you get the first bolt in, it'll be really easy to get the last bolt in. If you do that technique there, you should be able to get that one and then that one, and you're good. I'm about to tighten that one up. I'll give you the foot-pounds in a second. Up here, don't go crazy with this. I didn't even bother putting a torque spec on that. I just tightened it up. These guys, like I said, I'm just getting a torque spec for you, and then I'll tighten it to the same torque spec. But for now, I'm gonna start filling up our diff. Our diff does take, it says anywhere from 2 to 3 liters, so we have 3 liters just in case. So we're gonna start filling and checking on our dipstick. Once I know how much it takes, I'll tell you. As you can see, we're using 75 W140. We're gonna start this with 1 to 2 bottles. I'll probably pour 1 in, check. It won't even probably touch the dipstick, to tell you the truth. Just looking at the amount of fluid in there. Then we'll do a second bottle, and then from there, we'll start measuring as we go into the third. With this one, you can see you just simply do this. It's a slow pouring fluid because of the fact that it is such a thick liquid, but again, just let it pour in. I usually cut 1 cap all the way. After 2 bottles, I'd say, just from looking at that, we're halfway up the dipstick. So that means that be very mindful. We're probably gonna put in maybe a squeeze or 2, measure again. We just seen the fluid touch the silver, so we're good. So you take about 2.5. Again, it's a little bit harder to see, but you can actually see where it bubbles out on the dipstick. It doesn't help that I've been holding it a little longer, but if you look, you can see where it starts coming, like where the line is in person. You'll see that it's dry up the shaft and it's wet right at the marker. If you want, you could go a tiny bit above, but I wouldn't go too much just because you don't want to overfill your diff either. Now for this, I'll let you choose what you want to go to. I would not go to 30 foot-pounds as you have a O-ring on there that's meant to seal. If anything, maybe go to a maximum of 15. Again, this one isn't as crucial as these two. These two, if you don't tighten them to 30, there's a chance of them leaking. Where this one, it's not as big of a deal. I can't really see it backing out. If you want to, you can try. I just don't want to break the new O-ring that's in there. But other than that, next is just to go for a drive and then just inspect, make sure it's not leaking. Again, this fluid here is just from filling up and checking dipstick levels. What you'd really need to do is take it for a drive, and also don't let the fact that you just drained it be precautionary. If you want to, put the bucket back underneath. Now that you have this, don't get it on here, only on the bottom of the pumpkin. Shoot it with brake clean. You want to be careful with paint and brake clean. It can sometimes pull the paint. Just precautionary. But other than that, look how beautiful that looks. I'm gonna even try and turn off my light so you can just see if it just adapts. No, it just glows in the dark. But yeah, that's all there is to it. The difference of a headlamp. Anyways, thanks again for watching. I hope this helped you out. Press a like if it did and subscribe for more. Again, go check out Canadian Cruisin's channel. That's Kyle over there. And again, he owns this truck. We've done a lot of stuff with this truck and it's a lot of fun. So go check it out. If you're wondering why I had so much room, I removed the spare. If you put the bar in from under your back seat and you crank that down, it'll drop your spare out of the way. It can give you more room if needed.